This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
I have created the most advanced AI soldier.
The wait is over. Tron Ares now streaming on Disney+.
We are looking for something you've discovered. And some of us will stop at nothing to get it.
Ready?
The countdown is complete.
There's no going back.
Our directive is clear.
Hang on!
Tron Ares now streaming on Disney+. Rated PG-13.
Hello and welcome to The Shift, the podcast that aims to tell the no-holds-barred truth about being a woman post-40. Created and hosted by me, writer and broadcaster Sam Baker. This week, I'm delighted to welcome back the powerhouse Poorna Bell. Poorna is a journalist, author and speaker known for her advocacy on body image and diversity. And now she's adding ageing to that list. When Poorna first came on The Shift, she had not long turned 40, and it's fair to say she was a little trepidatious about the ageing process. Hardly surprising, since the narrative that's peddled to younger women is that there is nothing worse than being a woman over 40. Now 45 and perimenopausal, Poorna is shouting loud about the potential of ageing life and the revolution she sees happening all around her amongst older women. Poorna's written 2 novels and 3 works of non-fiction, and she's here to talk about the latest, the brilliant She Wanted More. In it, Poorna addresses the stories she was told about ageing and talks to other women about their experience. The aim? To rewrite that fear-based narrative and reimagine what older life can look like.
But what about things like strong bones? And what about things like the hobbies and that you have and the friends that you want to make and all of these things that make a life so rich? And yet the sort of the dominant things that seem to be pointed out or roadmap for women was how, what you look like. Like when, for example, when you consider when, celebrities above a certain age are celebrated, it's because they're wearing a bikini on the cover of a magazine, which is just so reductive.
Poorna joined me to talk about so many things I can hardly begin to list them. But amongst others, we discussed why changing the menopause conversation is good, but putting every last thing down to menopause isn't. Why nobody benefits from playing the game. Heteroconformity. The productivity trap. Telling ourselves and everybody else new stories around being single. Sexlessness. Learning our mother's stories. Weeding our lives, and why the best years of our lives are definitely not behind us. Poorna, thank you so much for coming back on The Shift. It's so lovely to see you. You're lovely. I can see over your shoulder, and you'll be able to see this if you look on YouTube at the trailers, listeners. But over your shoulder, I can see your lovely single lady, silent, relaxing abode. I hope I can. It looks like it. The big monstera, that's definitely your...
There's a big monstera and there's a grand bookcase, and these are both necessary for your single lady's abode, I feel.
I'm going to ask you, when we've finished, I'm going to ask you a question about monsteras because I need to repot mine and I'm a bit anxious. Anyway, yeah, and I am a bit deaf to plants, so I don't want to, it's okay so far. I wanted to start by asking you, when you last came on The Shift, which was about 4 years ago,
thereabouts,
I think.
2022, yeah.
Thereabouts. And you had turned 40 and you were still a little bit trepidatious about the whole being in your 40s thing. So I'd like to start by asking you what happened between then and now, because now you are like out there, 45 and proud.
I actually re-listened to that episode, and Yeah, I mean, there were definite moments of, oh, Bruno, why did you say that? But I think it's just always going to be the case that when you make grand statements about whatever time of life you're in the present moment, that is bound to shift and change, in a few years' time. And I guess that was about 3 or 4 years ago. But I do feel like 45 is different to 40, 41, even I would say 43, which is something that I do remember older friends of mine saying at the time. But again, it's one of those things you only know what you know, and you can only know certain things by living through it and getting there. I would say I very definitively now feel like I'm in my 40s, whereas I think when I just turned 40, it still felt different and good, but still disbelief, I would say. And now there's other things that I think are in the mix. So I would say I've sort of in the first year of perimenopause, and that has definitely been interesting in terms of figuring out how I feel about it, the conversations that are around it, which I didn't really feel like I had a right to talk about because I didn't know what it was like. And it's sort of one of those things where I think that there's an immense gratitude for wisdom and experience, and also from what it sounds like, all of the things that are yet to come from women that I've spoken to. But there is a slight tinge of sadness around things that I wish I had started earlier. And that is something that I think I'm still kind of working through. I don't think there's ever going to be an answer that I arrive at, but it just seems to be a mix of things on any one day.
So, for instance, the tinge of sadness, what would that?
I think the tinge of sadness is comprised of time. How time used to seem really infinite around certain things, that it wasn't even really something that was a thought. Whereas I think at the moment, I've got parents who are in their kind of late 70s at the moment. I look at, like, as in myself as a person and the kind of sports that I do, and the sort of the realities around some of the sports that I do, and how that might impact my body. And there is a very, there's a physiological truth about it in a way that there wasn't maybe in my 20s and 30s. And I think that while I still would never want to go back in time, I've never been like a glory days person of, oh my God, wasn't that the best time of my life? Because I think now it feels like it has been the best time of my life. There is a part of me that regrets not starting certain practices earlier, because I know how much easier or better aspects of my life would be now had I known that was open to me. But then, not to make it all deep and philosophical, but things unfold the way that they unfold. And I think that even if I had managed to go back in time and talk to my younger self about this, I think I just would have told myself to fuck off. So it's just, what do you do, Sam?
But that's the thing, isn't it? I don't think a single woman has come on here who hasn't said, oh, I wish I had an ex, usually often around relationships or body image, like both. But like you say, it's like when you were saying about the sport you do. And, I remember my husband saying to my stepson about who did martial arts to a high level, you break that and you don't get it fixed, it's going to be a nightmare when you're 40. And him like, yeah, fuck off, And of course now he's like, can't do it because that broken thing didn't heal properly. And anyway, boring truths about aging. Your body lets you down. So tell me, actually, you mentioned menopause, so I'm just going to go there first. So when did you start to be perimenopausal?
I would say it started in flickers. It was at the end of 2024. So pretty much just around about the time I was turning 44. I was also going through a not so great mental health period. And so it was difficult to discern anxiety that I've had all of my life and what was something else. And I think when I knew that it was definitely something else was, I think, brain fog. Again, I was like, I don't know. I was writing sort of 2 books at the same time. And When you writing books for me, personally, takes up a lot of real estate in my head anyway. I just thought, okay, maybe this is not so unusual. But then I was starting to forget things like the bank account number that I'd had since I was 12. And I was like, okay, this is not normal. And I had a sort of very gentle chat with my sister, who's about 4 years older than me and is very definitely in perimenopause. And I think after a time, I just thought, okay, let me just like trial HRT to see whether this resolves some of it. And if it doesn't work for me, then it doesn't work for me. And I started HRT and it resolved a lot of the things that I had been feeling. So I would say that I started HRT about 6 months ago. That's where I'm at now.
So do you think that, because obviously in the kind of 5, 6, when was the shift published? 5.5 years ago. So 6.5 years ago since I wrote it and 5.5 years ago since it was published. Obviously the conversation has really exploded around menopause. Do you think, I get kind of conflicting messages. I mean, we were talking before we started about comments and, you know, you can never please all the people all the time and trying that way madness lies. But I get conflicting messages, which are either, oh, thank you for being part of this conversation and thank you for making so that when I got this symptom or that symptom, I wasn't just all in the dark. And then I get messages going, will you just shut up? I'm sick of hearing about menopause and your scaremongering. It's like, which side of that would you fall on?
I would say, I'm not just saying this to be diplomatic, but I would say it's somewhere in the middle of that because, you know, definitely having written a chapter of it, about it in my book, She Wanted More, it taught me a lot of things that I didn't know in terms of, for example, things like why it's important to get on top of this stuff because there are long-term consequences to just trying to kind of like grit your teeth and get through perimenopause or menopause without any kind of like help whatsoever. And that was something I didn't know. It also gave me a massive sense of appreciation for, you know, so many like Gen X women, you know, such as yourself, such as people like Mariella Frostrup, who worked in the campaigning space in terms of like, let's say, inclusion of menopause within things like workplace practices and so on, which is really important. I would say the information that we have at our fingertips is amazing and necessary, especially when I compare it to my mother's generation who had no visibility around it and who have now, I don't want to be too harsh about this, but like have almost like, I think gaslit themselves around like menopause. Like my mum was like, oh yeah, menopause was really easy for me. And we don't remember it being that for her, but also neither do we want to rewrite her experience for her. But she had no access to any of this information. And as you know, most women, especially of that generation, thought that they were the only ones going through it and no one talked about this stuff. So on the one hand, yes, it's amazing that we have all of this information. However, I would say that there is a part of me that found parts of how people were having the conversation really off-putting, so that I would say it actually put me off wanting to deal with it before I was in perimenopause. And what I mean by that is a couple of things. I could not go to a meeting or like a social meeting or an event with women who were in perimenopause and menopause and talk about how I was feeling without them jumping on it and saying, oh, you must be in perimenopause. And it drove me mad. Like I thought about this yesterday because I was sort of out and about and I did that thing where, you know, it was absolutely freezing, but you then go into a very heated office, right? And so all of a sudden we're literally dripping with sweat. And I remember that this happened. I'm going to say at least 2 or 3 people said it was hot flushes and I wasn't in perimenopause. And also now that I'm in perimenopause, by the way, hot flushes are not part of my symptoms. I think it's both. I think that we do need this repository of information. We do need to discuss it so that you can take what you want and leave the rest. If it's not relevant for you, that's absolutely fine, you know. But I do also think that we need to be mindful around how we have this conversation with our friends and our peers in the same way that we as women would hate it if a man or anyone else tried to tell us what we were going through and how we feel about things. I do think we do need to do some like gardening or some pruning in terms of how we have these conversations. And I get it. Like when I'm talking to someone and they're describing like symptoms that are very clearly perimenopause, right? I'm like, Poorna, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. I literally have to have this internal thing. And then I might gently ask the question, have you thought about what else it might be? But I'm not, it's not my place to tell someone else what they're going through. And I feel like I understand why that conversation happens, because again, we haven't been able to have that conversation. So it's almost like, like it's an overexcited word vomit, and I understand it. But I also feel like we need to understand that it is scaring the absolute bejesus out of younger women. And it is creating a blocker as to whether or not they want to engage with it. And I think that there is a way of having that conversation without telling them that it's going to be terrible and that your life is going to end. Because that's what I thought it was going to be for me, and it wasn't.
Yeah, but I thought that before the conversation. And I think that's one of the reasons I think She Wanted More is so important, because what it's really, menopause is just one chapter in amongst loads of this very dogged proof that I've got. And it's about reframing the entire aging process, isn't it? Because, I think I'm trying to remember how you put it, and I'm not going to be able to, having made loads of notes, I then can never bloody find them. I was like, I don't accept that I have to have lived this long to be told my best years are behind me. And I think, that is part of a wave now that we're seeing amongst Gen X women, elder millennial women going, actually, hang on. And then, like you say, when you, as you mentioned earlier, the older women kind of going, well, there are, my knees aren't what they were, but, there's this and this and this and this. What was your own attitude to aging? How did that evolve that led up to you thinking, actually, I'm going to write this book?
I think it's, as you say, in that I realized it was a very, very fear-based narrative. And I don't think I realized like how so many of the things that I said and did were feeding into the ageism that's very pervasive in society. And that can be from things such as your vocabulary around, I don't know, calling yourself a granny because you can't figure out how to use your phone, or, assuming that because someone looks older that they might not be as capable or they might not be able to do certain things. And so I think it was definitely when I was writing Stronger, which was the last nonfiction book that I wrote around physical and mental health and strength, I came across women who were in their 70s and 80s who did athletics, so like pole vaulting and heptathlon. Having spoken to them, especially like there was this one woman who was incredible and who strung up a washing line in her back garden and used it to practice hurdles during the pandemic. And she was in her, I think, late 70s, sorry. And when I asked them, are you not worried about injuring yourself? They just said, well, no, like it's not, unless you've obviously got a pre-existing health condition, there shouldn't be a reason as to why you are automatically more frail than someone else. And so it was this very like gung-ho attitude that they had where they would just throw themselves into things, sort of talking themselves out of it. And I was really drawn to that. That was sort of a glimmer of something that just showed me that you could actually rework what older life looked like for you, and also to question some of the beliefs that we had, especially as I sort of as time went on. And you're considering things like the narrative around aging and in terms of aesthetics, and it seems to be, especially for women, so heavily aesthetics driven. And I was just like, okay, well, but what about things like strong bones, and what about things like the hobbies and that you have and the friends that you want to make, and all of these things that make a life so rich? And yet the sort of the dominant things that seem to be pointed out or roadmap for women was how, what you look like. Like when, for example, when you consider when, celebrities above a certain age are celebrated, it's because they're wearing a bikini on the cover of a magazine, which is just so reductive. It reduces an entire conversation around aging to something so one-dimensional for me. And at the same time, I was seeing these incredible women coming up into social media, because social media, there's not as much gatekeeping as there is in advertising and, sort of other like media outlets. If there is like a 62-year-old skateboarder who wants to chronicle her journey, she can just do it. She can just post stuff and she doesn't need to ask someone for permission. And so I was starting to see all of these women, especially in their 50s and 60s. And I'm very excited by women in their 60s because they're just doing like these incredible things. across so many different areas. And I was just like, yeah, I think like what we've been told about aging is actually not true. And it doesn't seem, what we're told about it doesn't seem to lead to anything good. Because if I was to follow the like mainstream narrative around it, I should be getting cosmetic work. I should be spending like hundreds upon hundreds of pounds on, skincare. And I should be doing all of these things to create the illusion that I'm not as old as I am when I'm as old as I am. Like nothing changes that. And it wasn't from a place of judgment, by the way, for anyone who chooses to, I don't know, get cosmetic work or whatever it is you choose to do. I think what I just wanted was a wider range of options for it to be okay to go, actually, I don't really want to do that. And I find that quite exhausting and I'd like to put my energy elsewhere. And I think I wanted to chronicle my own experience through that. And I also wanted to interview a lot of different women around their experience of that. And I just wanted to pull it together in this book, A, for people in my own age group and older, and B, to also say to younger women and girls that there is a different story than the one that you've been told. Because at the moment, I interviewed the beauty editor, Anita Bhagwan, about this. She said, problem that we have around the aging narrative isn't that people are afraid, like younger people are afraid of looking old. They're afraid of being old altogether. And to me, that's just nuts because that's life, And so I think that we have to deconstruct and remove some of the fear around it and also rework it according to your parameters, not to someone else's.
It's interesting you mentioned Anita because when she came on the podcast, she was 39, coming up 40. And she was really, you refer to the kind of doom thing of 40. And she was really in that at that point. Really, I would go so far as to say terrified because you're told to be, it's part of the thing that you call the game, which is that thing that tells a woman what she is, how to be and how, if you're a good girl and you follow the rules and you do everything right, everything will be hunky-dory. And that story seems that we're told that we kind of are signed up for because I don't remember signing anything. I don't think I've ever met anybody who has. That seems to involve that your value is entirely, and I know this sounds really like retrograde, but it does still seem to involve that your value is tied up in your fertility.
It's tied up in what you can give to other people. And so I think that it removes you from the center of your own life. And when you think about it, so something I really wanted for women, I always want women to feel agency in their own lives and to feel advocacy, no matter what they choose. I just want them to be aware of what they're choosing. But for many of us, we weren't aware of what the choices were. We weren't aware of the options because other aspects of identity are not validated. If you're not a mother, I can only speak for myself. I'm not a mother and I'm in my mid-40s. There is precious little to validate what my purpose is in life in mainstream society. So I have to do that for myself. And I have to connect with a community of other women who have been on a similar path to me. And in some ways, it makes you have to be very intentional about how you build community, I think, because you're right. There isn't, if you're not a mother after a certain age, people are wondering like what you're there for. And at the same time, there are women who are, and I'm not saying that, mothers are having a great time of it and, life is like easy and they're sitting on their sofa eating chocolates. They've got their own different set of problems in terms of trying to extricate themselves from that service role and trying to find a sense of self where, for example, we spoke about this, when they become grandmothers, they're not yet again pressed into more servitude, right? The things that are co-opted in order to guilt women into just providing endless amounts of labor. And again, my mother's generation, it's rife in my mother's generation, and I feel it in my generation. But this sense that you have to be productive with your time all the time. You have to have something to show for your time. And I think that is a really, really tough thing to extricate yourself from. But I think it's very, very necessary, because however, whatever age we live up to, I don't want to be figuring this out at the very end of my third act, that there was all of this stuff that I should have done differently. I would like to be figuring this out now going forwards. And I think the earlier that we can start to do that for ourselves, the better. But I would say I feel very strongly about this. There is a problem that I think we have at the moment, where there is an overemphasis on individualism. And it's not to say that it's all about me and it's all about my needs and it's all about what I want. Because I think that community is really important. I think sometimes we have to do things within our community that are inconvenient and we don't really want to do them. But it's about finding the equilibrium in that. So it's about finding a way that you don't lose yourself in the service of others, but it's also being able to kind of center yourself and to understand that unless you do that, everyone else around you suffers regardless, and you the most. And at the end of the day, you are the person that you have to live with, and you have to live with your choices. And so re-examining that and making some different decisions about that is not maybe a bad thing.
This episode of The Shift is sponsored by Shopify. I can clearly remember starting The Shift. It's such a leap, isn't it? Going out there on your own, doing a new thing. I mean, what if it doesn't work? What if nobody listens? What if all the tech comes crashing down around me? Now, over 5 years and over 250 episodes later, I know different, of course. Starting The Shift was the best thing I ever did. And it helps to have a partner like Shopify on your side to help. For a start, they'll help you get the word out, like you have a whole marketing team behind you, with easy-to-run email and social media campaigns. Shopify's your commerce expert, with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to shipping, returns, everything. And if you get stuck, their award-winning 24/7 customer support is always around to advise. It's time to turn those what-ifs into... With Shopify today. Sign up for your £1 a month trial today at shopify.co.uk/shift. Go to shopify.co.uk/shift. That's shopify.co.uk/shift. So why do you think that we're seeing at the moment, and maybe it's just that everybody's talking about it more, but it does feel like there's a real movement of women, I would say particularly 50s upwards, but also 40s, saying enough. I think you put it, I love the way you put it about that women reaching a point where they're no longer prepared to lower their standards. And that was and to settle, and that's in terms of relationships, but also in life. What do you think it is about now that we are seeing a kind of wave of that?
I think it's probably three things. I think that it's really important to say that obviously financial matters are a very important part of this. This is having even the choices to make decisions around your life has a privilege to it, and having some sense of like financial independence around that will make things easier for you to be able to do that. And there are women who, for a number of different reasons, are not able to access that. But I think it's that we have more financial autonomy now generally than previous generations have had, especially for women in their 50s and 60s. I think that the other thing is that when it comes to the conversations, as you described, around perimenopause and menopause, I think that there's an awareness of collective thinking in a way that I don't think was there before. So, this maybe previously, and this is supposition, but like if you were going through something like perimenopause or menopause and you thought you were the only one going through that, maybe people in your life might be making you feel like you're being a bit difficult and, you're sort of not playing ball. I think once you realize that actually there are hundreds upon thousands of women who are going through this and feel validated by that, I think that can be hugely empowering in terms of, just plugging into the good things that stage of life gives you, which is clarity, which is feeling empowered, which is tapping into your anger around just not wanting to have to do things all of the time. I know that you recently interviewed Melanie Sanders, who, she has tapped into a whole movement, right, around perimenopause and what women sort of do or do not want to put up with. But I think the third thing, which I may have to come back to because it's gone out of my brain, Sam. But yeah, I think for me those were the two kind of like main things. But I think it's also, I think there's just more of an awareness that there is life to live, and that actually you don't have to remain stuck in a situation because you've actually got quite a good few years left. Whereas I think a lot of women around my mum's age kind of think it's the beginning of the end. So you might as well just sort of put up with the things that you've already been putting up with for a long time.
Yeah, there's a statistic in the book about singleness. You cite a survey that says by 2030, 45% of women aged 25 to 44 will be single. And I would love to know what that statistic looks like for women aged 45 to 64 and indeed older, because I'm not sure that it's the preserve of women aged 25 to 44.
As in terms of them not wanting to be single?
No, of them choosing to be single. Before we started recording, we were touching on this idea of like the narrative of happy ever after, and the assumption that still prevails, even though I think there is a changing attitude to single women. I still think that there is, if you look at like the proliferation of romantasy and, rom-coms, and we're kind of, in a way, we're going backwards to that narrative of the one and the happy ever after. And I think there's like a mixture, because a lot of women, I remember I think it was the first time Jojo Moyes came on, not sure, about her saying that people thinking that she must be leaving for someone else, and they couldn't get their head around the fact that she was leaving for herself. And I still think that idea persists, that a single woman isn't a happy woman, which is mad, because I'm sitting here looking at you I want to come up with some really clever internet-worthy word for it, but I can't. You might.
I mean, I think the idea of being chosen, isn't it? And it's the idea of someone loving you and being with you, who sees you in your entirety and wants to be with you, and maybe strengthens you, but also by accepting your flaws allows you to accept them as well. And that's the goal. I understand why it's a really difficult thing to let go of. And what I would say is, so for women in their 40s and 50s, and obviously I don't speak for us all, as in those of us who are single, for me, it's not that I am choosing singledom so that if something came along, I would go, no, I'm really happy with my single life. Sorry, this is who I'm going to be forever. I think, to me, what it feels like is the sense that a level of peacefulness and beauty that I have built into my life, that means that I love my life, because I'm not putting stuff on hold. I'm living my life actively and fully, with me at the center of it. And if anyone else were to come and add to that, then great. But between you and me and whoever's listening, I don't know that what I would want and require from a partner, I don't know that person exists. Rather than feeling really sad and dejected about that, there's a sort of a restfulness of, I would be, I don't know how to explain it. It's not a hard line. I feel like very kind of soft edges. It's like, I'm open to meeting people. I'm not necessarily pursuing or seeking it, but it feels different to the conversation that I've seen, especially amongst younger women at the moment, which I completely understand, by the way, where they're just so sick and tired of dating that they won't date at all. And I wonder what the evolution of that conversation looks like for them, because I understand why they feel like that. But to me, that feels like it comes from a place of anger and pessimism, justifiably or not justifiably so. And that's not sustainable. I think that ends up poisoning your life. And so I wonder what the evolution is of that for, let's say, Gen Z, because I don't think anyone's having a good time of dating at the moment. I totally understand what you're saying about the romantic narrative of romantasy, but I would say my interpretation of it is the reason why those books do so well and the reason why it's so popular is because they are safer realities for women to live in than the actual reality of going on a dating app and meeting someone and it being disappointing. That is my take on it. I don't know whether it's true at all. It's a very like trendy thing to say, oh, men are terrible and God, they're dating them is awful. But no one's having a good time of it. Like men and women are not having a good time of it. And I kind of feel like if the focus, I get it, everyone's got work that they have to do. Men have an extraordinary amount of work that they have to do on themselves as a group. But I also don't feel like that's how we're going to fix the current problem in dating, because it just seems to create really deeply entrenched silos where no one's communicating or talking or trying to bridge that gap.
So what has your own, because you've been, single for 10 years since Rob died, what has your own experience of the dating been, and how has your equilibrium with your single life affected that?
It's so funny you ask this. I was thinking this the other day and I was like, wow, it's been like 10 years since I've had a serious relationship. I've had like 2 micro relationships in that time. And so overall, I would say I've had 2 relationships in that time and maybe half of a third relationship. I don't know. It wasn't a situationship, but I don't think it was a relationship. But 3 people I cared like very deeply about. And while I'm really glad that I met them, they just did cause chaos in my life. Like, there was a part when it was great and then it was just absolute chaos. And I think that there was a part of me that just thought, it's been 10 years since Rob died and I haven't been in like a serious relationship since then. And what does this mean? I kind of actually sort of had this whole, what does it mean? And will I ever be in a serious relationship again? And then I just kind of thought, I don't need an answer around that. And also, who does that time frame matter to? I think it only really matters if I'm talking to someone else about it. If they ask me, when was your last serious relationship? But I think the grounds for me not wanting to get into a serious relationship are pretty solid. I do have a very sharp sense of what I would need there to be present in a long-term relationship. I just am not that bothered about finding it. I don't feel like it's an overwhelming thing that's missing from my life. And I'm sure that there will be people who will refuse to believe it and who, will insist that if only I met someone, my life would be much better. And I'm not saying that meeting someone amazing wouldn't make my life better. I think that you could say that of a friend. If you have like a really wonderful, amazing friend in your life, they make your life better. But I also just know that dating is hard and I just don't know that I'm that bothered about it. And I think at the age of 45, I think I've got the right to say what makes me happy and what I like. Like, I think I've lived enough years to have earned that right. And so that is something I would say feels great about being this age, which is even if someone on TikTok like scolds me about it in the comments, I'm just like, shut up. Like, probably younger than me, you don't know anything about life. And also it just doesn't feel like applicable. Like, I don't get, I mean, I know I just said shut up, but like, I don't get upset about it because I don't feel touched by it, if that makes sense.
So you do date on the apps. How is it?
I haven't really been dating properly for about a year. Like, I've gone on a couple of dates, but I think that work has just been such a all-consuming presence. I think I went on a few dates at the start of 2025, and then I realized that I just didn't want to be dating. Like, I just didn't have anything to give them. I didn't want to hear about how many siblings they had. I just didn't want to do small talk. And whatever energy I had left over, I just wanted to spend on my friends and family. And so I kind of just took myself out of dating. I actually deleted dating apps for 6 months, and it was really calming. But then I also had a couple of dates with people that I had met in real life, and those are also terrible. So I just don't know, Sam. I don't have an answer. I just think that I date when I want to, and I don't date when I'm not in the mood for dating. And that feels like balance to me.
you talk about sexual fluidity in She Wanted More, and I've got a chapter on it as well in The Shift. And it really struck me when I was writing The Shift that it was I don't want to say a huge number of women, but it was like a significant minority of women readdressing their sexuality at this time of life. And in part of the women I spoke to, it seemed to be a bit of a mixture of, I don't know how much of it was literally biology, and they never needed to worry about that anymore. But there was also I didn't, if I'm like a young boomer or a Gen X, I didn't even kind of know that was an option. When I was growing up, being heterosexual was just what you did in the 80s.
So something that I was really interested in was charting that percentage or that group of women who had reconfigured their sexuality or had discovered things about their sexuality a bit later in life. And I remember coming across this conversation that Miranda July had started on her Substack, where she had asked women who had come out or had figured out that they were queer later in life and what that looked like for them. And I found their answers, really, really interesting. Like myself, discovering that, my sexual identity was like much broader than I thought it was in my 40s. And I kind of had to go, how did you not know earlier? And I would probably describe myself as pansexual. I think I'd had to do a lot of digging into that. And I learned about heteroconformity. And so when I interviewed Catherine Gray for the book about this, because she did this post where she talked about realizing that she was bisexual when she was in her early 40s. And if you are bisexual, or even if you're not, our society is so geared towards heterosexuality. Even if there is a part of you that is fluid, you probably will conform to the heterosexual part of you rather than feeling able to explore like the other parts. And that, I think, is an amazing thing that has changed for Gen Z specifically, because they statistically are a lot more sexually fluid than other generations. And there's a real lack of shame and stigma around like how they view these things. The idea of homophobia, for example, for Gen Alpha is like they just can't comprehend it. They just don't understand why it's even a thing. And that gives me an enormous amount of hope. But the other thing is also women who are coming into their own when it comes to tapping into sexual fluidity, because it just makes the world a more known place. It makes them feel more known within that. And that definitely was one of the most beautiful parts of writing that chapter. There's another lady who I interviewed who is from the South Asian community. Her name is Suja, and she left her marriage of 20 plus years and is now in a relationship with her best friend who happens to be a woman. And, everyone said, oh, is that why you left your marriage? And Suja was like, no, the marriage was not good. And it just turned out that her best friend happened to be a woman and happened to be one of the best people that she knows, and realized that she had romantic feelings for. So I think that, to me, that just signposted that you haven't necessarily missed out on anything. Sometimes these things happen at the time when they're right to happen. Something that Catherine said that resonated really deeply was that if she had come out in her early 20s, she was dealing with so many other things that were in flux around her identity just as a person, right? That she said that being able to also think about potentially being queer would have been a lot more discombobulating for her, rather than considering it in her 40s when she was much more sure of herself as a person. And I really loved that. And this is something that has come and is being pushed and is being led by people younger than us. And I think that there's a really beautiful kind of full circle within that. There are people who have been in the queer community for years upon years, and all of the hard work that they do dismantle that stigma around it. But I love that we have a younger generation coming up who are untouched by it to a certain degree in a way that we just weren't. I mean, I went to school and Section 28 was in force, that is trying to explain that to them now. I don't know that they could even comprehend it.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
I want to ask you about your mum. The book is dedicated to her, a lovely dedication. And you had some conversations both with your mum and with her elder sister, Mira, didn't you, for the book? Why was it important to you to learn your mother's story?
I'd always known parts of her story, but I don't think I had really registered the potential of her. You know, my mum is a very intelligent person. She's got a lot of energy. You know, she's like this little sort of ball of energy, really. But there were significant points in her life where you could see the direction her life could have gone. And then because of various blockers that were in place, she just couldn't go in those directions. And I think that the reason why I interviewed her was because she is the closest thing, you know, that I have to not just like what life at that age might look like for me or who she is as a person, but I do carry a lot of her genetics. And so she's the only thing really apart from my dad that I have in terms of looking down the line to what might be waiting for me. But I think I wanted to comprehend her as a young woman. And I don't think I really understood what that was like for her. And I felt like I needed to understand it selfishly for myself in order to maybe appreciate some of the things that I'd been given. But also, I think it's important for a person to feel seen. I mean, some of the stuff she told me, I know that she's spoken to other people about it, but I don't know if she's ever talked about it in that much detail. And so it was important for me to understand her. And I wanted to hear it from her in her words. I didn't want to have it secondhand from, you know, someone else. So I think that's why that conversation was really important. It made me really sad. It just made me really, really sad because I just kind of felt like I'm lucky that I've had some people to help and protect me and to help me get to where I needed to get to, you know. And also I was born in a different time where things were just easier for me because systems change and institutions do change, even though they don't feel like they do. I wish I could have done something for her when she was younger. I wish she had someone like a me or a her. But sometimes that's the way that things roll, unfortunately.
Yeah, it does make you think, looking back, because, you know, when our mothers were young women, getting married and having children was what you did, even more so for our grandmothers. And it does, I don't know, makes you wonder if you'd even be here if they'd had a choice, you know.
I think that the question it did answer for me is that I don't think my mother ever would have not had children. Like, I definitely know I have some relatives who probably wouldn't have had kids if they'd had a choice. But I also know that my mother is such a mothering person that she can't comprehend that I am not a mothering person. Like, I think deep down she still thinks I would be a great mother. And I'm like, I don't think I would have been. I just don't think I would have been. I don't have that capacity for care and nurture in the way that she does. But that's okay. My sister has a child and
you get to be auntie.
Yeah, and being auntie is great. Yeah. I do feel I have more uncle energy, but yeah.
So what's the difference between auntie energy and uncle energy? I mean, I think I know, but say.
I feel like uncle energy is just like, I don't know if you've seen Uncle Buck, but like that's what I feel my energy is versus, you know, auntie energy. I feel like auntie energy might be a bit softer, whereas I'm just like, come on, get on with it. It's just stop babying her. Like, just throw her into the pit. She'll be fine.
Before I ask you the questions I always ask at the end, I just want to ask you about weeding, because I absolutely love this idea. It's pretty much the first chapter in the book after the introduction. And I think it was so interesting to me, firstly, that it was there. That was the very first thing in the book, but also the whole idea of, getting rid of the things that make you, well, you tell us I'm not going to tell you what weeding is. You tell us what weeding is, because it's your concept. And I think so many women will go, oh yeah, I need to do a bit of that.
When I was writing this chapter, I learned about weeds, and I learned that literal plant weeds, which is that a weed isn't something that is inherently bad. A plant is a plant. There's no such thing as a good or a bad plant. The problem is when it grows in the wrong place and it just takes up like nutrients like water and, sunshine or whatever it is that plants have. And it takes it away from something else that might be more useful or beautiful in your garden, right? So I use that as a metaphor for beliefs that we have. Each of us have these beliefs that were planted at a very, very young age. And some of them have been there for a very, very long time. So sometimes we can't distinguish actually what was something that came from ourselves versus something that was implanted from somewhere else. But some of them are just not very helpful or very useful. And I think, for example, one of the examples I gave was around certain beliefs around like the disparities in men and women's strength, right? So this belief that if you're a woman, developing muscle or growing muscle isn't really a thing that women do. And there's no reason for why we should have that belief, but it holds us back from, doing other things, which actually could lead to really important things later in life. And I will stop banging on about this one day maybe, but I feel really strongly about strong bones. And so I think if you can kind of like dig up some of those unhelpful beliefs, whether that's around, I've got like a long list of things that I found really unhelpful in that chapter, because I found that they were just blocking me from pursuing certain behaviors, certain things. More importantly, it kind of blinded me to certain ideologies that actually would have been very helpful to know from a younger age. I think like even when we expand it more broadly, like for example, there's a whole chapter on sex in the book. And when we look at things like around women's pleasure, around the fact that the disparities, for example, around chastity, how chastity is something that is funnily enough, like mainly aimed at women, but doesn't seem to be the case for men. And so I just wanted people to almost do like a stock take and an inventory for all of these things that sit at the back of your head that you might not have realized are holding you back from certain things or dividing you up in society in a way that isn't particularly helpful. And something which, this isn't in the book because I am ashamed to say I only really learned it afterwards, was even like something like the realization around honorifics, like why does a man just get Mr. and why do women have Ms., Mrs., Miss? Like why does society need to know what your marital status is, but it doesn't seem to know what a man's is? And I think it's just those kind of like very subtle fundamental differences can be very helpful to work out where some of your core beliefs seem to come from and whether they're actually very helpful to you. And in my case, I found a lot of them weren't.
Yeah, it was one of the things when I was reading the book that I really felt like if I take one thing from them, there were so many things to take out of the book, but if I took one thing, weeding would be a really helpful thing, and maybe something you just haven't thought about because you thinking a lot about the externals, and a lot of these things are external, but you've embraced them, inhaled them. I know there's a better word, and that's my brain is not finding it.
Yeah, and also I don't know how you feel about it, Sam, but like it depends on also the diversity of our circles, and so most of us at this age will have people in our lives that we've known for a very long time. And so your beliefs may not necessarily be confronted, in the same way. They may not necessarily be challenged because most of us want comfort and we don't necessarily want to be challenged all the time. But I do feel like that is something that social media helps me with. It helps me to see my blind spots in a way that I'm not able to really do, I think, with my friends and family. in the same way.
But do you find that you have to actively seek that out? Because the algorithm just feeds you more of the same.
I mean, I consume a lot online because I want to know what's going on all the time. But I read comments. I feel like that to me is one of the most useful ways of learning certain things, engaging like a sensibility around things. So yeah, you do have to, I think you can't be as passive in your intake of information. You do have to seek certain things out. But we do live in a time where people aggregate these kind of things and so if you follow certain accounts, you probably will see things that will challenge your thinking. You don't have to accept all of it, but I certainly don't. But I definitely, one or two things occasionally will slip through.
So you had, 1,000 women answered your survey and you spoke to hundreds of women during the course of researching the book. Can you pick like 1, 2, 3, if one's too hard, of the things that really stuck out for you, that really made an impact on you?
From the women who wrote in, I think there isn't one specific thing that I can pick out, but there were a few responses that were in response to a question I asked about people in, 10 plus years relationship. If you're in a 10 plus year relationship, how have you renegotiated, your relationship with each other? And there were some amazing things in there, by the way, but there were definitely some things that I was haunted by, which is people who just said, oh, I hadn't really thought about it until I read this question. So they'd never had that conversation with their partner in like 10 years. There was some women who, this was actually very helpful in the chapter that I wrote about sex. I would say the scope of the chapter is quite broad, and it's, for people who are single, but also people who are in especially long-term relationships. And sexlessness, for example, it seemed to be a massive topic for people in very long-term relationships. And specifically, there seemed to be a pattern, which is the woman wasn't happy with the situation that they were in a sexless marriage. When they tried to bring up with their partner either didn't want to talk about it at all, or their partner would kind of shame them and go, is that all you think about? And so they were very stuck, right? And then I asked women who had, again, negotiated that period of time. And what was really interesting was that for many women, it seemed to be that period of sexlessness was either due to having kids, or it was because maybe a parent had died, or there was some kind of bereavement that had happened. But then they had done this wonderful thing where they had a chat about things, and they had decided to try some new things. And then their sex lives were better than ever. And also that they had the expectation that menopause would just kill off their sex life. And one woman, God, this made me laugh so much. She said, has menopause killed off my sex life? I wish. And that just made me laugh so much, because I felt it was really important to include that for some women it might, and for some women it really doesn't. The women that I interviewed for the book, I mean, they're quite far reaching, I would say, in terms of, they're just different. The person who I felt very honored to interview, who has subsequently passed away tragically now, was Betty Reed Soskin, who was 103 when I interviewed her, and she died at 104. And I think just being able to have time with her was amazing. And that is probably something I will never forget from writing the book.
I think I underlined almost everything she said. She's an incredible, incredible woman. And if you've never heard her, look her up. I mean, I think she was a really important park ranger, wasn't she?
Yeah, she became a US park ranger in her 80s. Yeah, she retired when she was 100.
Amazing, incredible woman. Of all the brilliant observations and interviews in the book, I think she is absolutely standout, definitely. Right, questions I always ask, because we have been here hours. What's your emotional age?
It hasn't changed from when we last spoke. It's still 28. I still can't give you a specific. I still can't give you a specific reason why. It's just 28.
Okay, give us a book recommendation. The answers can't all be the same as last time, by the way.
I can't even remember what oh God, Sam, I'm sorry. My brain is just I don't even know what I'm reading at the moment.
We'll come back to that then. Something might pop into your head. What advice would you give younger women?
Nothing is fixed in time. I know it's really, really hard because whatever's currently happening to you right now, you think is going to be the thing or the state that will persist forever, but it really, really won't. And I think that if you can allow for an understanding of that, you'll know that things can change. Because sometimes I think we just get very fixated on the job we have or the powerlessness that we feel in a certain situation, and that will change over time. You will get more wise, and being wise is great.
Who's your old bird role model?
Ooh, at the moment, my old bird role model is Heidi Clements, because she's amazing and she is a 60-something fashion influencer, but also does storytelling. And I just saw a video of hers where she's really confronting the idea. I mean, she talks about so many amazing things, but she was talking about making yourself unpick the phrase that women say to themselves when they get cosmetic surgery, which is, I just want to feel better. And she kind of, in this video, says we need to name the thing and say, look, what we're saying is we want that because it makes us, we think that looking younger is the thing that's going to make us feel better.
Brilliant. What's your superpower?
My superpower currently is that I feel like I'm starting to care less about things, but also due to some of the brain fog around perimenopause, things that would have made me really angry, I can't remember what half of those things are. And that actually I can't believe I'm saying that, but I'm like, oh, what was that thing that you got really angry about? And I honestly, Sam, gun to my head, I couldn't remember.
Brain fog is your superpower.
I mean, it's both a curse and a superpower, but then aren't all superpowers.
Totally. And last one, how many fucks do you give?
I give a lot of fucks, actually, about certain things. I give a lot of fucks about people being horrible to other people. And then I don't give any fucks at the other extreme end of the spectrum about things that just, I don't care about gossip. I don't want to know. I don't want to know about the details of other people's lives unless it's a funny story. I just don't care. I don't care who's done what or where they're going or what they've said or what they're doing. It's just brain rot. I don't want to know it. If you have gossip, just go tell it to someone else. Unless it's funny or juicy.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy The Shift and would like to show your appreciation, why not buy me a coffee? Go to www.buymeacoffee.com/The Shift with Sam Baker. You can hear a new episode of The Shift every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, please do rate, review, follow, tell your friends, because it really does help other people find us. And if you'd like to know more about my own experience of shifting, my book, The Shift, How I Lost and Found Myself After 40, and you can too, is out now in paperback.